Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, am I truly living or am I just getting through each day? Too often we assume that a fulfilling life at 70 comes from big milestones, grand achievements, impressive successes. But what if I told you that true fulfillment isn't found in those grand moments? It's hidden in the little things, the everyday victories, the simple joys that reveal your strength, your resilience, and your ability to thrive rather than merely exist. If you can still do certain things, you are far from being too old. In fact, you might be healthier, sharper, and stronger than you realize. Imagine effortlessly climbing a flight of stairs, remembering details from yesterday's meal, or laughing until your belly aches. These small moments, they are proof that you're not just aging, you're thriving. Today we'll explore 6 subtle yet powerful signs that you are living, not just growing older but growing stronger. Stick around because by the end of this video, you'll have the key to unlocking more vitality, joy, and independence in your golden years. Subscribe now and let's rediscover what it truly means to live fully at 70 and beyond. 1. Climbing stairs without stopping. The great Roman philosopher Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." There's an undeniable truth in that. Struggles are not meant to break us, they shape us. In ancient Rome, soldiers trained by running up the steep steps of amphitheaters, their bodies growing stronger with every climb. Even when they had the option to take an easier route, they chose the harder path, because they understood something we often forget. True strength is built in the effort, not in the destination. Now, let me tell you a story, one that may feel all too familiar. I was 72 when I realized how much the world had changed around me. Not in the grand historical sense, but in the small, everyday ways that people no longer seemed to embrace effort. One morning I walked into the bank. Yes, an actual bank, because I still liked speaking to a real person rather than pressing buttons on a screen. As I waited in line, I overheard 2 younger men talking about a gym membership they had just purchased. They spoke of training programs, heart rate monitors, and expensive supplements. I chuckled to myself, thinking, they spend money to lift weights in a climate-controlled room, but they avoid walking up a single flight of stairs whenever they can. That thought lingered in my mind the rest of the day. Later, I visited my friend George, who lived in a small apartment complex. He was 75 and had recently fallen ill. When I arrived, I found out the elevator was out of service. I stood at the bottom of 3 flights of stairs and looked up. For a brief moment, I hesitated. I felt the stiffness in my knees, the creak of old bones. It would have been easy to complain, to curse my luck, to sit down and wait for someone younger to come help me. But then a thought struck me, what if I couldn't do this anymore? Would I simply accept that life was supposed to get smaller, that each limitation was permanent, that every little struggle should be avoided rather than conquered? No. So I put my foot on the first step, then another, and another. My breath deepened, my heart worked harder, and my muscles, those same ones that carried me through childhood, through decades of work, through raising my family, came alive. By the time I reached the top, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while: pride. I walked into George's apartment with a smile on my face. He looked at me, slightly amused. "You look like you just won a race," he said. "Maybe I did," I replied. That moment changed the way I looked at aging. You see, the world today tells us to take the easy route. Elevators, escalators, mobility scooters, all of them have their place. But they have also made people forget that movement is a privilege, not a burden. Society encourages convenience, and in doing so, it quietly convinces us to surrender our strength before we need to. When did struggle become something to avoid? When did challenge become a sign of failure rather than a measure of resilience? I see it in the younger generation, how quickly they choose the shortcut, how easily they give up when things become difficult. But I also see it in my own peers, how many of them have accepted a smaller, weaker version of themselves, simply because society tells them they should slow down. Here's the truth. Strength is not about youth, it's about will. I think of my grandmother who grew up during the Great Depression. She never saw stairs as an inconvenience. She saw them as part of life. An opportunity to prove that she was still capable. She cooked every meal from scratch, walked miles to work, and carried groceries in both hands. Not because she had to, but because she refused to let age dictate what she could or could not do. When I climbed those stairs that day, I wasn't just testing my physical strength. I was proving something to myself. I was proving that I was still here, still strong, still capable. And so I made a promise to myself that day: as long as I can walk, I will climb. Now, I want you to think about something. The next time you see a set of stairs, what will you do? Will you take the easy way, or will you challenge yourself just a little, just enough to remind yourself that you are still alive, still strong, still thriving? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. Tell me about a time when you faced a small challenge and overcame it. Have you ever surprised yourself with your own strength? I want to hear your stories. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and share this video, because we're in this together. Let's keep climbing. 2. Remembering what you ate yesterday. The Greek philosopher Plato once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." He wasn't just talking about grand philosophies, he meant the small things too. Memory is not just a tool for recalling the past, it is the foundation of our present. The ability to remember yesterday's meal is more than just trivia, it's proof that our minds are still sharp, still engaged, still capable of weaving the moments of our lives into a continuous, meaningful experience. Let me share a story, one that may remind you of a time when the world seemed to move slower, when conversations had weight, and when memories weren't just fleeting thoughts, but anchors to something deeper. The older I get, the more I realize that the smallest details in life matter the most. When you're young, you don't think much about memory, you assume it will always be there, like the sun in the sky. But let me tell you something, memory is like a muscle. The less you use it, the weaker it becomes. I learned this lesson from my father. He was a simple man, never had much schooling, but he had a mind as sharp as a blade. I remember how he could recall the price of groceries from a decade ago, the smell of my mother's cooking on a cold winter night, even the names of every neighbor on our street from when I was a child. He used to tell me, "Son, remembering is a skill. If you stop paying attention, the world starts slipping away from you." I didn't fully understand his words until I saw it happen to my friend Richard. Richard and I had known each other for over 50 years. We met in the army, stayed in touch through marriages, children, and even retirement. Every Sunday we would meet at the same cafe on Main Street, just two old men sipping coffee, reminiscing about the past and solving the world's problems one conversation at a time. Then one Sunday something changed. He sat across from me, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. I asked him what he had for dinner the night before. A simple question, a harmless one. But he hesitated. I don't remember," he finally said with a nervous chuckle. At first I thought nothing of it. We all forget things now and then. But the next week he forgot again, and then again, and soon he was struggling to remember the names of his grandchildren, the stories he had told me 1,000 times before, the little things that made him him. Watching Richard fade like that scared me. It made me realize how fragile our minds can be if we don't care for them. So I made a promise to myself. I would treat my mind like I treated my body, keep it active, keep it engaged. I started playing word games, reading new books, and most importantly, paying attention. I no longer ate meals mindlessly. I savored every bite, memorizing the flavors, the textures, the way the meal made me feel. And you know what? It worked. A few weeks ago, my granddaughter sat at my kitchen table, playing with her tablet. She looked up at me and asked, "Grandpa, what did you eat for breakfast?" Without hesitation I answered, "I had oatmeal with walnuts and a drizzle of honey, and a slice of toast, whole wheat with just a bit of butter. Oh, and a black coffee, just the way I like it." She giggled, shaking her head. "You remember all that?" "Of course," I said, tapping my temple. "This old brain still works just fine." And in that moment I realized something profound. Memory is more than just remembering facts. It's about being present in your own life. In today's world, where people rush from one thing to another, eating in front of the television, scrolling through their phones at dinner, treating food as just fuel instead of an experience, it's no wonder so many minds are slipping. If you don't engage with life, if you don't pay attention, you start to lose pieces of yourself. So let me ask you this. Do you remember what you ate yesterday? Not just the food, but the taste, the smell, the feeling of that moment. Because if you do, that's something to celebrate. It's a sign that your mind is still alive, still thriving, still engaged with the world around you. Share your thoughts with me in the comments. Do you have any tricks or habits that help you keep your mind sharp? Have you noticed how modern distractions make people forgetful? I'd love to hear your wisdom. And if this story resonated with you, give this video a like and share it, because our minds are worth taking care of. Let's keep remembering. 3. Standing on one leg for 10 seconds. The ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once wrote, "A tree that cannot bend will break in the wind." Balance, whether in the body, the mind, or the soul, is the foundation of resilience. The ability to stand on one leg is more than just a physical skill. It is a reflection of our overall well-being, a sign of the harmony between our muscles, nerves, and spirit. In many ways, it mirrors how we navigate the challenges of life itself. Let me tell you a story, one about balance not just in movement, but in the way we face adversity, aging, and change. When I was younger, I never thought much about balance. It was something I took for granted, like my eyesight or the strength in my hands. But as the years passed, I began to notice small things, how my steps felt less steady, how I gripped railings tighter than before, how the floor seemed to shift under me when I stood up too quickly. Then one day I nearly fell. It was nothing dramatic, just a moment of unsteadiness while putting on my socks. But that moment stuck with me. Falling wasn't something I used to think about. Falling was for children, who could scrape their knees and bounce right back up. But at my age, a fall wasn't just an inconvenience, it could change everything. That night, I sat on my porch, thinking about the friends I had lost to accidents, to broken hips and slow recoveries. It scared me. But more than that, it made me realize something. If I wanted to keep living on my own terms, I had to start paying attention to my balance, not just in my body, but in my life. A week later, I was at the park when I saw a group of children playing a simple game. They stood in a circle, laughing and challenging each other to balance on one foot. I watched as they wobbled, adjusted, found their center. Some of them fell, but they got right back up, trying again with even bigger grins on their faces. Something in me stirred. I walked over and with a chuckle asked if an old man like me could join. They laughed, but they let me. I lifted one foot, focused my breath and held steady. 10 seconds. 15. 20. The children clapped. One of them, a girl with bright eyes, said, "Wow, Grandpa, you're better at this than my dad." I laughed, but inside I felt something even deeper, a sense of pride, a reminder that age had not taken everything from me. I was still strong, I still had control. From that day on, I made it a habit. Every morning, while brushing my teeth, I stood on one leg. It became my quiet test, my daily proof that I was still here, still capable. And the more I practiced, the steadier I felt, not just physically, but emotionally too. You see, balance is not just about standing on one leg, it's about how we handle the things life throws at us. These days, I see so many people, young and old, losing their balance in ways they don't even realize. The younger generation is constantly pulled in different directions, glued to their screens, overwhelmed by the noise of the world. They're always rushing, always distracted, never standing still. And my generation? Too many have given up, believing that aging means slowing down, retreating, accepting limitations before they even exist. But here's the truth. Balance is something we must actively maintain, physically, mentally, and emotionally. If we stop trying, we lose it. A few weeks ago, my granddaughter visited me. She saw me balancing on one foot and laughed, asking what I was doing. I challenged her to try it. She wobbled, giggling, barely making it past 5 seconds before toppling over. "But you're so old," she protested, pouting. I smiled. "Yes, and that means I've had more practice." She tried again, this time focusing, determined to match her grandfather. And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. The lessons we learn about balance, both in body and in life, are ones we can pass down. They are not just about avoiding falls, but about standing strong through the challenges life throws at us. Now, I have a challenge for you. Wherever you are, stand up and try it. Lift one foot, find your center, and hold for 10 seconds. If you can do it, celebrate it, because that's proof that your body, your mind, and your spirit are still in harmony. And if you struggle, don't be discouraged. Like all things in life, balance is something we improve with practice. Tell me in the comments, how did you do? Have you noticed changes in your balance as you've gotten older? And more importantly, what are the ways you keep balance, not just physically, but in the way you approach life? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story spoke to you, like and share this video. Because in a world that constantly tries to throw us off balance, we need to remind each other to stand strong. Let's keep steady, let's keep moving forward. 4. A heartfelt laugh, the most precious medicine. The great American writer Mark Twain once said, "The human race has only one really effective weapon, and that is laughter." He was right. Laughter is not just a fleeting moment of joy, it is a shield, a medicine, and a defiant act of resilience against life's hardships. No matter how tough things get, those who can still laugh have already won half the battle. Let me tell you a story about a woman I once knew, someone who taught me that laughter is not just an escape from life's struggles, but a way of facing them head-on. Her name was Helen. She was 82 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and had a laugh that could fill an entire room. Not a delicate chuckle, not a polite giggle, no, Helen's laugh was deep and rich, the kind that made people turn their heads and smile before they even knew what she was laughing about. I met Helen at the senior center. At first she seemed like any other woman her age, frail hands, slow steps, a face lined with decades of love and loss. But then she opened her mouth, and the world around her changed. One afternoon we were sitting in the lounge, sipping weak coffee and watching the news. The anchor was discussing the latest political scandal, the economy, the state of the world. It was the kind of segment that made most people shake their heads in frustration. But not Helen. She threw back her head and laughed, a full, belly-shaking laugh that startled everyone in the room. "What's so funny?" I asked, half smiling, half curious. She wiped a tear from her eye. "Oh, honey, if I don't laugh, what else can I do? Cry, worry, get angry? I've lived long enough to know that none of that changes a damn thing. But laughter? That changes me." I didn't understand it fully at the time, but the more I watched her, the more I realized Helen's laughter wasn't just amusement, it was survival. She had buried a husband. She had outlived 2 of her children. She had been through wars, recessions, and personal heartbreaks that would have broken most people, and yet she laughed, not because life had been easy, but because she refused to let the hardships steal her joy. One day I asked her how she kept her spirit so light. She leaned in close, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "I'll tell you a secret," she said. "The world wants you to take it seriously, wants you to believe that every problem is worth losing sleep over, every mistake is a catastrophe, every bad day is the end of the world. But let me tell you something." She pointed a frail finger at my chest. "Life is a joke, and the ones who make it to the end smiling, they're the ones who got it." I laughed then, not just because of what she said, but because I felt it. From that day on, I paid attention to the way people carried their burdens. Some let them crush them, turning bitter and heavy with the weight of all they'd endured. But others, people like Helen, refused to give their suffering that kind of power. They laughed, not because their pain wasn't real, but because they had learned the greatest trick of all. Pain only wins if you let it silence your joy. Now, when I look at the world, I see so many people burdened by stress, politics, financial worries, the endless noise of bad news. I see young people glued to screens, scrolling through misery, taking everything so seriously that they forget to live. And I think of Helen. I think of how, even in her weakest moments, she found something to laugh about. How she understood that laughter is a rebellion against despair, a protest against the weight of the world. Helen passed away 2 years ago. At her funeral, there were tears, of course. But do you know what else there was? Laughter. Because every single person in that room had a memory of her that made them smile. And what better legacy could someone leave behind than that? So tell me, when was the last time you laughed? Not just a little smile, but a real, full-hearted, tears-in-your-eyes kind of laugh. Because if you can still laugh, at yourself, at life's absurdities, at the unpredictable twists and turns, then you, my friend, are thriving. Share a moment in the comments when laughter got you through a tough time. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to like and share, because we all need a little more laughter in our lives. Keep smiling, keep laughing, and most of all, keep living. 5. Maintaining meaningful relationships. The Greek philosopher Aristotle once said, "Man is by nature a social animal." He wasn't just talking about friendship, he was revealing a truth about survival. Human beings were never meant to live in isolation. From the earliest days we gathered in villages, shared meals, told stories, and leaned on each other. The strength of our connections has always determined the quality and even the length of our lives. In Okinawa, Japan, home to some of the longest living people in the world, there is a concept called moai, a lifelong circle of friends who support each other through every stage of life. When someone falls, there are hands to catch them. When someone celebrates, there are voices to cheer them on. It's no coincidence that they live longer, happier lives. But in modern America, where individualism is praised, too many people grow old alone. Let me tell you a story, one that might sound all too familiar. I had a friend named Tom. We met in college, back when life was loud, chaotic, and full of promise. We were young men with grand ambitions, dreaming of the future, swearing we'd always stay close no matter where life took us. And for a while, we did. We attended each other's weddings, celebrated new jobs, watched our children grow up. But as the years passed, something strange happened. Life got in the way. Work, responsibilities, distance, the phone calls became less frequent, the visits turned into Christmas cards, then just a passing thought, I should call Tom soon, but soon never came. Then one day I got a call. Tom's wife. "He's gone," she said, her voice hollow. I stood there, gripping the phone, stunned. I hadn't spoken to him in years. How could someone who was once such a big part of my life just disappear? At the funeral, I sat quietly as people shared stories about the Tom they remembered, the Tom who made them laugh, who was always there when they needed him, and then his wife spoke. He was lonely, she admitted, tears in her eyes. He wouldn't have said it out loud, but I saw it. He missed his friends. He missed his life. Her words struck me like a hammer. Tom had people who loved him, yet he still felt alone. That was the moment I understood something I had ignored for too long. Friendship isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. I left that funeral with a decision. That night I picked up my phone and dialed an old number. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was familiar, but older, wearier. "It's me," I said. "It's been too long." There was a pause, and then a quiet chuckle. "Yeah, it has. That was 10 years ago." Since then, I've made it a rule. Every week I call someone from my past. An old friend, a distant cousin, even a neighbor I haven't spoken to in years. Not a text, not an email, a real call, with real words spoken out loud. And you know what? It's changed my life. I see too many people my age retreat into isolation. They sit in their homes, watching the world move on without them, convincing themselves that no one remembers them, that they no longer matter. But that's not true. People don't stop caring. They just assume you're fine until you remind them that you need them. So if you're sitting there thinking of someone you haven't spoken to in a while, pick up the phone. Don't wait for an invitation. Don't let pride or hesitation stop you. Reaching out isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. The happiest, longest-living people in the world don't spend their final years in silence. They surround themselves with love, with laughter, with voices that remind them of who they are, and so should you. Now I have a challenge for you. Think of someone you haven't spoken to in a while, someone who once mattered to you, someone who might be sitting alone waiting for a call that never comes, and then call them. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. And when you do, come back here and tell me how it felt, because I promise you it will change something in you. If this story spoke to you, share it. Let's remind people that growing older doesn't mean growing apart. Let's bring back the friendships, the connections, the love, because life is too short to live alone. 6. Cooking for yourself, a testament to independence. The great Julia Child once said, "You don't have to cook fancy or complicated masterpieces, just good food from fresh ingredients." Cooking isn't just about nourishment, it's about life itself. The ability to prepare your own meals is more than a basic skill. It is an act of self-reliance, a quiet declaration of independence. In ancient times, sharing food was sacred. The Cherokee people believed that cooking for oneself and others was a form of gratitude, a way of honoring the land and the hands that toiled to produce the ingredients. Even today, cultures around the world understand that cooking is not just survival, it's tradition, memory, and connection. But in our modern world, convenience has replaced patience. Fast food, takeout, frozen dinners, so many people, especially the younger generation, have lost the simple joy of preparing a meal. Among seniors, I've seen something even sadder. Many give up cooking entirely, believing it's too much trouble, that they're too old, or that no one is around to enjoy it with them. Let me tell you a story about how I almost fell into that trap, and how a simple meal brought me back. For 50 years I cooked for two. Every morning I made breakfast, scrambled eggs with just a pinch of salt, toast with real butter, and coffee that was never too strong, just the way she liked it. Every Sunday I prepared her favorite dish, chicken pot pie, with a crust so flaky you could hear it crackle when you cut into it. And then, one day I was cooking for no one. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't just take away the person you lost, it takes away parts of yourself, too. The first few weeks after she was gone, I barely ate at all. Then, when I did, I lived off microwave meals and cereal. I told myself it didn't matter. Why bother cooking when there was no one to cook for? I didn't realize how much I had lost, not just her, but the simple pleasure of standing in my own kitchen, the smell of onions sizzling, the feeling of dough beneath my hands. One evening, my daughter came to visit. She noticed the untouched pots and pans, the empty fridge. She sat me down and said, "Dad, you always told us that food is love. So why have you stopped loving yourself?" I had no answer. That night I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked. It wasn't anything fancy, just a bowl of soup, but a proper one. I chopped the carrots and celery, simmered the broth, added just the right amount of seasoning. And when I sat down to eat, something happened that I hadn't expected. I felt whole again. That meal wasn't just food, it was a promise, a reminder that I was still here, still capable, still me. These days I cook every single meal, not because I have to, but because I choose to, because every slice of bread I butter, every pot I stir, every bite I take, is proof that I am still living, not just existing. I know a lot of people my age who have given up on cooking. They say it's too much trouble, that their hands aren't as steady, that it's easier to eat something quick. But I want to tell them, don't let convenience steal your independence. Cooking isn't about impressing anyone. It's about reminding yourself that you matter. That your health, your comfort, your ability to create something with your own hands is still worth celebrating. I think of all the young people today who barely know how to cook. They live off takeout, processed foods, quick fix meals that lack the care and soul of real cooking. They don't know the joy of kneading dough, of tasting a sauce that has simmered for hours, of feeling connected to something as simple and profound as a homemade meal. We, the older generation, still hold on to this wisdom. We know that food is more than just fuel. It's memory, it's love, it's resilience. So tell me, what's the last meal you cooked for yourself? Did you savor it? Did you feel the warmth of the kitchen, the comfort of a home filled with the smell of something real, something yours? If you haven't cooked in a while, I challenge you, make something this week, even if it's just a simple soup, even if it's just for yourself. And when you do, come back here and tell me how it felt, because cooking isn't just about feeding the body, it's about feeding the soul. And you, my friend, deserve a life that is still rich with flavor. So, my friend, when was the last time you stood in your kitchen, took a deep breath, and cooked something just for you? Not out of necessity, not because you had to, but because you could. Every meal you prepare is more than just food. It's a quiet declaration that you are still here, still capable, still thriving. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. What's a dish that brings back memories for you? What's a meal that reminds you of home, of love, of simpler times? And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, because together we'll continue uncovering the small, meaningful moments that make life worth savoring. After all, life, just like a good meal, is best enjoyed one bite at a time.